Hey everybody, it's Alex at Motoroso, and in this video we're going to take a close-up look at the Rekluse RadiusX Auto Clutch for the 790 and 890 KTM Adventure and Adventure R. We're also going to be doing an installation and setup guide. Now, we watched some of the other installation guide videos on YouTube and we noticed that everybody did a decent job showing you how to install it, but nobody showed you how to set it up and tune it properly, and that is extremely important with these clutches if you don't want them to burn out ahead of time. So watch our installation guide and our setup video in high detail, follow all those instructions, and you should get great performance and well over 10,000 miles out of this clutch. Now, as usual, we're going to put links to this product in the description of the video, and we'll put a link to that right here. That'll take you over to Motoroso.com where you can buy this clutch or hundreds of thousands of other items. You can also reach us there on live chat or call us toll free at 833-MOTOROSO. Now, my stock clutch is actually fine. In fact, that's it right there, and it's perfectly okay. It's got about 2,000 miles on it. It's been performing well. I'm doing this upgrade because I want the performance gain, I want that awesome auto clutch feature, but also because these bikes are notoriously hard on clutches, I don't want my clutch going out when I'm out on a BDR or on an adventure ride and getting stuck in the field with a roasted clutch. And they're hard on clutches because of the design. The design is a sump design, which is sort of like halfway between a dry clutch and a regular traditional clutch that sits in a bath of oil. This clutch does not sit inside the oil, it sits above a sump, and then as the RPMs build and the case pressure builds, a throwout valve opens up and spits oil onto the clutch. So it's good for performance, but it is a little bit harder on the clutch, especially if you ride the bike hard off-road. But lucky for us, this also means that it's a very easy and not very messy install, and we're going to show you how to do that. It's much easier than your traditional clutch. Rekluse Auto Clutches have become regarded as one of the most game-changing mods that you can make on adventure bikes or dual sport bikes, specifically because of the massive impact that it has on the riding experience, especially when you get down into technical terrain or sand like you might find on a BDR or down in Baja. And it's called an auto clutch, not because it shifts for you, obviously, but because it eliminates the need to use the clutch out of first gear from a stop. It also makes sure that the engine doesn't die if you're slowing down, the RPMs get low, or you come to a stop and forget to pull in the clutch in time. And this is a massive advantage when you're in technical terrain and you're needing to focus on the riding at hand. Especially on a big adventure bike when you're loaded down with gear, this allows you to just forget the clutch, twist the throttle, focus on banging through the gears and getting over the terrain. Now, some people would call this a cheater clutch, to which I would say, I guess I'm a cheater then. I don't know what I'm cheating at because I'm not competing. My goal is to ride my adventure bikes to remote locations as fast, fun, and safely as possible. And I consider this to be a safety feature pretty much. This is going to allow me to focus on riding my bike in those technical situations without having to feather the clutch and focus on my balance all at the same time. And it's also just going to radically increase the fun factor while increasing the safety factor at the same time. And that matters to me because I've got two prosthetic hips and I am looking to avoid as many dabs, spills, and crashes as I can. So if I'm cheating, so be it. I'm in because this is better riding through better technology. Now, don't confuse this with your clutchless up and down shifter that comes on the bike. That's a great feature, but it doesn't make the bike fully clutchless. It only allows you, once you've pulled away from the start, to start banging through your upshifts and your downshifts. And it's awesome, and it's changed the way we ride. But this actually, installing a Rekluse clutch, will make your bike fully clutchless, meaning you can start from first gear, from a full stop without the clutch, bang up and down through your gears with your quick shifter, and even slow down to a stop without pulling in the clutch. And that is a game changer in those tricky technical environments, but also just in traffic. If you're ever riding through the city on the way to a ride, not having to mess with the clutch all through traffic, it's just a total game changer. Without going into too much technical detail, I want to quickly explain how this clutch works. And to do that, we'll start by how a traditional clutch works. So a traditional clutch connects the power of the engine through to the transmission. And it does that through this clutch pack of friction discs and steel discs. And essentially, when you pull in the clutch lever, it releases a pressure plate that lets all these discs move freely. But as you let that clutch lever out, these discs start to press together, increasing the friction and transitioning the power from the motor through to get the wheel turning, essentially. Now, as you let the clutch completely out, then it's fully engaged, and a good clutch that's good to go is going to transfer 99.9% of that power to the ground. But as a clutch burns out and these friction discs stop working with each other, they start to slip and then they burn out even faster, and that's why a burnt clutch slips and won't let you drive the motorcycle forward. Now, the genius design that Rekluse has invented and introduced here is essentially the same types of things you would see in a regular clutch. You've got your friction discs, which are actually unique in their design that make sure more oil get into the friction discs, and the steel discs. But the star of the show here is this unique expansion disc assembly that they've invented. This is what allows your bike to sit in gear without driving forward, but then to engage the clutch as you hit the throttle. So this beautiful little CNC machined aluminum housing is essentially friction discs on the outside, but on the inside of the assembly it features wedge weights that are heavy, and essentially as the RPM spins up, the weights using centrifugal force move to the outside of the assembly, and they're a wedge that forces the friction discs apart, essentially acting like the pressure plate of the clutch when you pull it in. So as the engine RPMs go up, the clutch engages and the bike drives forward. And as the RPMs spin down, the wedge weights move back towards the center, forced there by the springs inside the pressure plates, and that allows the clutch to disengage. And even if you don't pull in the clutch, you can come down to a stop without the engine dying. Now just imagine how advantageous that is if you're in some deep sand in Baja and you get a little offline, or you're not quite used to riding in that stuff and you're trying to make your way out of there. Instead of having to balance the bike and feather the clutch and manage that whole scenario, you can just focus on your actual balance, focus on your line, hit the throttle, and get over your obstacles. It also includes replacement springs for the expansion pack. And what that means is that you can tune the way that this Rekluse clutch does its thing. It's going to come set up with medium weight springs, and that's going to be good for basically an all-around feel. That's probably going to be perfect for what I want for an adventure bike, because I am doing street riding and dirt riding. But for example, if you wanted the clutch to engage at lower RPM and offer more engine braking, you can put in the softer springs, which is going to allow the weights to push the plate out more easily, and that's going to allow it to stay engaged longer. Now, if you'd like to perhaps get less engine braking and you want the clutch to only engage at a little bit higher RPM, and you're going to ride the bike really, really hard, and you don't want that engine braking, you want to freewheel into corners essentially, you can put in the harder or firmer springs. And I believe there's 4 or 5 levels of springs that you can get, and you can custom tune exactly the way this feels. And it's pretty easy to do too. There's just a little cap that you pull off with a flathead screwdriver, drop the new spring in and put the cap back on, and you're good to go. So it's easy to adjust this after the fact. Benefiting from the full longevity and performance of a Rekluse clutch definitely depends on installing it exactly correctly and setting it up and using it and maintaining it exactly right over the life of the clutch to maximize that time. Now, it is very simple to do. You just got to make sure you know what you're doing, and we're going to take you through all of that in our installation guide and the setup portion of this video. So make sure you watch the whole video. But first, we're going to take you through a few tips for how to use and ride the clutch to make sure you don't burn it up way too quickly. Now, benefiting from the full performance gains and longevity of a Rekluse clutch requires that you install it properly, then you set it up properly, and then you maintain it properly, and then you ride it the way it's meant to be used. And so we're going to cover all of this in the video and in the installation guide, so make sure you focus on every part of this video. Now, this little rubber band over here, that's not a Livestrong bracelet. That's actually a very important tool that they include to help you initially set something called the free play gain. And that is a unique term only to Rekluse clutches, and we're going to take you through what that means and how to set it at the end of our install video. But before we do that, we want to talk to you about how to use and ride this clutch to maximize its performance and longevity. Now, the first tip, and this is going to be a recurring theme, is that it is key to keeping the RPMs higher for the performance and longevity of a Rekluse clutch. And one of the easiest ways to make sure your RPMs are always a little bit higher is to go to lower gearing on your bike. And it's super easy to do. You can just go to a 15-tooth front sprocket on the bike down from your stock 16-tooth. You could even go down to a 14. These front sprockets only cost like 20 bucks each, so just buy both of them and see which one you like. That's going to make sure that the RPMs at all speeds have to be a little bit higher, helping your Rekluse clutch stay engaged. Now, that's going to have the fun side effect of making your bike more torquey, peppy, pull wheelies more easily. But if you're doing a lot of adventure touring rides where you're doing highway miles, that 14 might sacrifice a lot of top end speed. So like I said, just try both and see what you like. Again, it is all about RPMs, and it works on the lower end of the spectrum as well. This clutch is not going to enjoy low RPMs, especially lugging the bike. And if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, that's when the RPMs start to get so low, but the bike in the clutch is still engaged. The bike starts to lurch back and forth and glug, 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 glug. It's not good for the engine. It's not good for a traditional clutch. And this is a more expensive clutch. It's not good for this one either. So don't do that. Lugging is not loving, as they say. Don't do that to your bike, period. Don't do that to a Rekluse clutch. It's going to wear it out more quickly than you would like. Now, As you can tell from everything I just said, RPMs are key. So the harder you ride this clutch, the better. Be friendly with those RPMs. Hit that throttle hard. The harder you ride it, the longer it'll last and the better it'll perform. Now it's very important. I said this before. You got to get this thing set up properly at first. We're going to cover that after the installation guide. And then you have to maintain it and keep adjusting that free play gain. Now, one of the things people appear to be commonly doing is they'll set the clutch up initially, then they'll go ride and they won't check their free play gain for a couple of months or a year, and then the clutch just isn't performing the way they wanted it to. It's very important to recognize that, like all clutches, there is a break-in period. So you got to set it up and tune that free play gain correctly when you install it before you go ride it. Then after your break-in ride, literally within 25, 50, 100 miles, you got to come back and start again, not start again, but just fine tune that free play gain to make sure it's set up properly. From there, you won't have to check your free play gain all that often, but it is good to check it every several rides to make sure it's staying in that optimal range, because from there, the change over time will be subtle and your Rekluse clutch could just fall out of tune a little bit and start burning up quicker, and then you're gonna have to rebuild it. And that is one of the nice things about this clutch. It is rebuildable. Now, lastly, they also make some exceptionally high quality premium synthetic oils that you can run in your bike that they recommend as the best for your engine and this clutch. So consider using their extremely high quality oils with your Rekluse clutch. And on that note of oil, because of the design, as I mentioned, this is a very clean install. It's not going to be sitting in oil. We're going to show you how to do it. It's super easy to do. It's not messy. That also means that you don't have to change the oil when you put in this clutch, which is great. It saves you one oil change. But after you put the clutch in, you got that break-in period. You want to change your oil within about 250 to 500 miles after installing this new clutch, and maybe you want to consider using their oils to do so, so you've got a broken-in clutch and clean oil for your upcoming rides. All right, as I said before, this thing is available for sale on Motoroso.com. There's a link in the description, and we'll put a link right here. That'll take you over to Motoroso.com, where you can purchase this clutch, and we sell hundreds of thousands of other items. You can reach us there on live chat, or you can call us toll-free at 833-MOTOROSO. Now let's jump into our installation guide, and don't forget to hang around for that setup instruction as well. Before installing the Rekluse clutch, we first need to remove the OEM KTM clutch. Now, our bike looks a little different with all of our sparkly farkles, but all the steps are going to be the same. With the bike on a center stand, rear stand, or kickstand, unhook the clutch cable from the throwout arm. Then remove your rear brake master cylinder and heel guard if you have one. Using an 8mm socket or a T30 Torx, next remove the clutch cable bracket. Moving to the clutch cover, remove the 7 8mm or T30 Torx bolts, securing the cover and remove it. Using a 10mm socket, remove the 3 bolts holding the pressure plate spring retaining plate in place, and do this 5 to 10 turns at a time, not one bolt at a time. Then remove the OEM pressure plate springs and the pressure plate itself. Using a pick or a flathead screwdriver, carefully remove the frictions and steels of the OEM clutch back. Now, there are 2 very small rings deep inside. Do not remove those. You're going to reuse them. Before starting your install, soak your friction discs in engine oil for a few minutes. We actually forgot to do this, so it's not the end of the world, but it is highly recommended. We also recommend building out the whole clutch pack on a workbench before starting your installation, and measuring the steel discs with a caliper to make sure you get them exactly right. The order and sequence of these frictions and discs is very important, so we'll go through each one in detail here. The first disc that will go into your clutch is a thick judder friction disc, then the 0.06-inch steel drive plate, followed by a thin friction disc, and then a 0.04-inch steel drive plate. Continue to alternate 3 more thin friction discs with 3 more 0.04-inch steel drive plates. Now your expansion disc will go in with the flathead caps facing outward from the clutch. Next will be the 0.048 steel drive plate, then a thick friction disc. That's followed by the 0.065 steel drive plate, and then the final thick judder friction disc. Now you can turn this whole stack over and simply install these discs in order, but it's not a bad idea to double check each one as they go in. Next, you're going to install the Rekluse basket sleeves into the basket slots, making sure the sleeve tabs sit against the inside of the basket and that they are pushed all the way to the back of the basket slots. We left the judder seat and spring in the clutch basket when removing the OE clutch, but if you removed these, reinstall them in the same order with the judder seat followed by the judder spring. Next, we can start inserting our Rekluse clutch pack. Start by putting in one of the thick friction discs, then the 0.06 inch steel drive plate, followed by a thin friction disc and then a 0.04 inch steel drive plate. Continue to alternate 3 more thin friction discs with 3 more 0.04 inch steel drive plates. And on top of the last drive plate, install your expansion disc with the flathead caps facing out towards you. Over the expansion disc, install the 0.048 drive plate. Now the last few discs will be installed on the pressure plate itself. First, install a thick friction disc against the pressure plate, followed by the 0.065 steel drive plate. And you'll know you have the right steel plate here because the size of the teeth are very much different from the other drive plates. Lastly, install the final thick judder friction disc onto the steel pressure plate. Now you can install the pressure plate onto the clutch pack, taking care to keep the drive plate indexed to the pressure plate. A slight counterclockwise rotation will help to index the pressure plate to the clutch assembly, and you'll know this is properly indexed when the pressure plate is flush to the basket, as you can see here. Next, install the Rekluse pressure plate springs, followed by the Rekluse spring retaining plate with the OEM bolts, and thread these bolts in 5 to 10 turns at a time, not each bolt at a time. Then snug, and then torque the plate bolts to 12 Newton meters or 106 inch-pounds. Then, making sure the gasket and case surface is free of any debris, reinstall the clutch cover and refasten the clutch cover bolts in a star pattern, torquing the clutch cover bolts to 10 Newton meters or 88 inch-pounds. Reinstall the clutch cable bracket and reattach the clutch cable to the throw-out arm. All right, we got our clutch installed and we're done, right? No, absolutely not. I've been harping on this the whole video. The next step is to set this up, and these settings are critically important to get the right performance and longevity out of your Rekluse clutch. Now, this is a cable-actuated clutch on the KTM 790, 890 Adventures, so it's pretty straightforward. Here's how you do it. You're gonna start down here at the clutch cable adjustment. At the clutch case, you're gonna make sure that you have 3 to 4 threads showing on the outside of the last jam nut. So we'll give you a close-up shot of that. Then you're gonna come up to the lever clutch perch and you're gonna adjust your cable adjuster by threading that all the way in. Loosen that lock nut and thread that all the way in, creating the shortest cable housing possible. Then you're going to reset your clutch countershaft lever. And you're gonna do this by loosening the pinch bolt, pushing the lever all the way out clockwise while using a flathead screwdriver to rotate the countershaft counterclockwise. So turn the screwdriver to the left and push the arm out and then tighten your pinch bolt, and that'll set a little bit of cable tension. Now, normally you would be looking for a little bit of slack in a clutch lever on a traditional clutch. In this case with the Rekluse, it is not going to feel like that. So the next step is you're going to turn your clutch perch cable adjustment out 7 to 8 full turns. And you're gonna be putting serious tension on that clutch lever. If you've adjusted a normal clutch before, this feels totally wrong. But for your Rekluse clutch, this is what you're going for. So thread that thing out about 7 to 8 full turns, and then that should be our starting point to check for our free play gain. All right, so now to check the free play gain, we recommend doing this with a little bit of heat in the bike. Don't do this while the bike is cold. And heat the bike up by just starting it, running it in neutral for about 5 minutes. Don't ride the bike, it's not set up yet. Just let it come up to temperature so that everything performs as expected. These clutches only actually work properly when the bike is actually warmed up. Then, once the bike is warmed up and running, you're gonna check the free play gain by applying a little bit of pressure to the lever and blipping the throttle to about 4,000 to 5,000 RPM, and then releasing the lever and checking again. And when you blip that throttle, the lever should come back a little bit towards the bar. And what you're looking for at the end is only about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch of movement of that free play gain. And there's 2 ways to apply pressure to that lever. They provide this nice orange little rubber band that you can wrap around the bar and apply some pressure, or you can just use your hand to hold the lever and blip that throttle. Now, if it has too much throw, if it comes back 1 inch or 2 inches, that's way too much, and the cable tension is too loose. You need to add a little bit more cable tension by threading that clutch perch adjuster out. If the clutch lever doesn't move at all when you blip that throttle, then the cable tension is way too tight and you need to dial it in a little bit. And what you're looking for is about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch of movement. So this is how you set your free play game. We're gonna show you exactly what that looks like, what too much movement looks like, and what the right setting looks like. And then we're gonna show you how to diagnose that the bike is set up properly and how to feel to know that the bike is working properly. I like to do this initial setup on a rear stand to make sure that everything is, even though you're doing it in neutral, just to make sure nothing drives forward and the bike doesn't fall over and nothing gets really messy. So let's get started. Okay, now with our free play gain adjusted, I shut the bike off real quick. I'm gonna start it in a moment. Now what we're gonna be able to do, take the bike off the rear stand, put the kickstand up. You're gonna start the bike, pull your clutch in, hold the brake, and put it in first gear. And then what you're gonna do is slowly let the clutch out, holding that brake, and slowly let the brake off. If the bike starts to drive forward a lot, then the free play gain is not set properly and the bike is driving forward too much. You're gonna wanna take out some cable tension. And if the bike is not trying to move forward at all, then you wanna adjust a little bit less free play gain. You wanna tighten that cable tension just a little bit. So let's see how we did here. All right, bike's in gear, holding the front brake. I'm gonna let the clutch out. I can feel the bike starting to move forward a little bit. It's kind of chugging it just a touch. It's probably too much. Well, no, there you go. So I just let off the brake. The bike is trying to move forward just a little bit, as you can see, but just by holding it here with my hand, it's adequate. And then with my body weight on here, it shouldn't move forward at all, because that is just about right, I think. So there it is. With my body weight on it, the bike is not pushing forward at all. Although if I were off the bike, it would walk itself forward just a touch. That is pretty much a perfect adjustment. So now what we need to do is ride the bike 25, 50-ish miles and then recheck that free play gain and get it right back to that setting, because the clutch will break in a little bit in that period of time, and then it could potentially be driving forward just too much. Might need to add just a little bit of cable tension to get it right back to where we want it, but that is set up and pretty much ready to go. Now let's show you how it works. All right, with our Rekluse clutch installed and the free play gain set properly, I can start the bike, kick it in gear, and take it off without using the clutch, and I can come back around. I can come to a full and complete stop in first gear without ever having to pull in that clutch. It's a total game changer. That's what a Rekluse clutch is all about. All right, so a weekend has passed since we did that initial setup, and as you can see, I found a little bit of mud and got this thing out for its first break-in ride with my Rekluse clutch. Now, it was fantastic, great experience. However, I definitely had to make some adjustments. That initial setup that we did, it wasn't quite right, and I knew right away. And here's how I knew. Putting the bike in second or third gear, as I would hit the throttle to drive forward, I wouldn't feel the kind of pull I was used to with this bike, and the revs would go up without the front wheel coming up or the bike lurching forward. And so clearly the clutch was slipping and it wasn't fully engaged. And that was my first telltale sign that it wasn't set up exactly the way that it needed to be. And if I left it like that, I was definitely gonna burn this clutch out. So I started playing with the clutch lever cable adjuster, and I dialed it in almost 2 full turns until I found that spot where I was getting the drive that I wanted in second and third gear at 4,000 RPM. If I hit the throttle, the front end would come up and it would drive forward the way that I wanted it to and the way that it should when that clutch is fully engaging. I even stopped and then checked the free play gain, and what I noticed is it's definitely a little bit more than what Rekluse says it should be. Instead of that 1/8 to a quarter to a half of an inch, it looks more like an inch to me, but that was where it was actually working. The biggest thing that I noticed is that when in gear and at a stop, the bike drives forward a little bit more firmly than it did when I initially showed you the setup, but it's still not so much that you're fighting to keep the bike from rolling forward. And when you're sitting on the bike, it is definitely more noticeable. You feel it lurching forward under you, but it's not going anywhere unless you actually hit that throttle. So I'm gonna fire the bike up and show you what that looks like in gear, and make sure after you've installed your clutch on that first ride, you do that final part of the setup during the break-in and make sure you get this thing just right. All right, so starting the bike up in neutral, I'm just gonna pop it in gear, and you're gonna see the bike's gonna wanna immediately start going forward. And if I let go, it does roll forward more easily. Before it was very subtle, now it definitely moves forward, but it's not like I have to like fight it with my legs to push it backwards. So it's definitely, when you're on the bike, it's no big deal. Very, very easy to manage, but that is the correct setting that you're looking for. Just one last tip, and what I found as I was adjusting this cable tension to get it to exactly the right spot was that as I dialed that cable tension adjuster into the clutch perch, it got harder and harder to find neutral. And eventually I kind of got to the place where it was really, really difficult to find neutral. In fact, I almost couldn't. As soon as I backed that out just a little bit more and then could get in and out of neutral easily, that was the sweet spot that worked perfectly for clutch engagement, the bike driving forward. And that's where I've left it, right where it is now. All right, so this clutch is available for sale on Motoroso.com. I'll put a link to that right here. That'll take you over to Motoroso.com where you can shop with us. You can hit us on live chat, or you can call us toll free at 833-MOTOROSO. Now, if you'd like to get your bike set up with optimal luggage setup for adventure riding, check out this video right over here. Hope you find that helpful. Subscribe to our channel, and thanks for watching.